You're listening to the Heavy Duty Parts Report. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin, and this is the show where you get expert advice about the heavy duty parts you buy and sell and keep you informed about what's happening in the industry. Lighting on commercial trucks, when you think about it, some people do the bare minimum. Other trucks I've seen, they're lit up like a Christmas tree. Regardless of what the driver's personal preference is, there is a minimum level of lighting that is required to ensure that commercial vehicles are safe. In this episode, we're going to talk about smart visibility systems for the heavy-duty truck industry. And to help us with that, I'd like to introduce you to Chris Kamek, Global Market Manager Aftermarket at Grodys. Chris, welcome to the Heavy Duty Parts Report.
Jamie, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Now, Grodys been around a long time. I did a little bit of research on Grodys. 1901, the company was started, and I understand that the Grodys have been operating it all that time. You've been with the company 21 full years. I think you're in your 22nd year with the company. How has a company like that remained innovative for such a long period of time?
Yeah, Jamie, you're right. I actually have my 21-year anniversary on the 15th of November, and then I will be, starting that 22nd year. So it's been a fun adventure for me. The company, as you mentioned, was founded in 1901, and it started out in the suburbs on the Kentucky side near Cincinnati, Ohio, and it originally started out with William Grodys. And it was a chemical company. We were making soda ash initially for the original Mr. Procter and the original Mr. Gamble, and before it became Procter and Gamble. And that's kind of how the company got started. It was the original Mr. Grodys was a chemist, and he sold patents to James Kodak and things like that. His son Walter brought in the first molding machines from Germany, some of the first from Germany, and created the system that made automated molding machines, plastic injection molding. And for that, he's in the Plastics Hall of Fame. And those molding machines are in some archive or warehouse someplace in the Smithsonian Institute. At the 100-year anniversary, we tried to get those back to see, because we had donated them, for decorations in the room. And they politely declined that offer because they said they had no idea where they were at. They were in some kind of archive, but they certainly knew they had them, but they weren't sure where. But that's, when the company starts that way, right? You're trying to find your way and figure out how to do things. It's built into the culture, and it's built into the history, and that history, it permeates all the way through. It is still a family-owned company, and that's one of the big pieces of that innovation story. Our core values are trust and integrity, responsibility and respect, and that's all woven through the way the Grodys family goes to business, the way they operate their business, and the culture that they built for us as employees at Grodys. We're, as you mentioned, family-owned company. We're a heavy-duty visibility solutions provider for the transportation industry. And so everything that we do, really since the late 50s, has all been centered around automotive and the automotive industry and the heavy duty industry as we progress through. We're not only trucking, we're growing as a supplier in the off-road industry, so agriculture and construction as well. It's a funny, if you don't mind, we've got to sidetrack a little bit. I started before I started at Grodys in '98. You mentioned I've been here 20 some years, so I started in '98. I was in the radio industry, and I was a morning DJ and sports director and news director at a really small station. And there are some parallels between what my career has been like here at Grodys and that radio station. When I first started, we were still spinning records, right? 33s and trying to cue them up. And then we moved from records to CDs in the short time I was there. I only did that about 5 or 6 years while I was in college. And we went from records to CDs, and at the end of my career, we were at satellite. We were beaming all of the content in. And there was really a quick turn in the technology in the radio industry from the late 90s to the early 2000s. I started here in '98, and it was very similar. We had 1 or 2 email addresses. We were still doing paper memos. And all of a sudden, we're changing everything. We have internet, we have email, our processes are changing. The way we manufacture things are changing. We're growing as a company from having the world headquarters here in Southern Indiana to 2 facilities in Canada, 1 in Mexico, then adding a European facility and adding a couple of Chinese facilities. So that hunger for growth, that drive to be the best supplier in the industry, that really is baked into the culture. And I've been lucky to be on both sides of it, right? We go from incandescent lighting to halogen and then LED, or from an interior light, from a fluorescent light to an LED light. I've been really lucky to see that whole progression right at the end up to where we're at. And who knows what we'll be doing in the future. Maybe it'll be lasers and maybe sharks with lasers on their head or something. I don't know. But it'll be it's exciting. It's a fun company to work for.
Yeah, great Austin Powers reference. That's fantastic. I actually have a story for you that you wouldn't have heard this probably. So it would have been about 2007. And I just went to work for a very large national aftermarket distributor of heavy duty parts here in Canada. And Gord Alloway, who's now retired,
yeah.
Great guy though, great.
Good old Gord.
Good old Gord. Yeah, Gord came in and he was a sales manager for the Western region, and he was bringing in his new salesman to introduce us. And Gord had a bit of a gripe. We weren't selling enough Grody parts. But it was really funny because before they came to visit us, the branch manager and I made the decision to transition the store to a Grody house. And so we actually packed up all the other guys' lights. We minimized the inventory down to almost nothing, sent it all back to the DC, and we put in a massive Grody order. And the whole wall was all Grody lights. And so Gord had walked in, and he was so used to going to that store, I don't think he even noticed the change. He walked into the office, and he very, very professionally brought up that we weren't buying enough. And so I kind of had a little bit of fun with him. I came back really assertive and kind of had a little bit of fun. And then I pointed out the window of the office and I said, "Why don't you look over there, Gord?"
Yeah, how much do I have to sell?
Yeah, and it's just all Grody lights. He's like, oh, good. That's really good.
I'm glad my speech worked.
So we had a good laugh about it, and Gord and I think I always respected Gord, and I really enjoyed the time that I got to work with him. He was fantastic, such a great guy. And if we'd had the chance to work together, I'm sure we would have taken it. It never did transpire that way, but then he retired. So yeah, so that's my story.
Yeah. Gord's a great guy. Great. We've our aftermarket I'm responsible for the aftermarket Grody globally. And we're almost a 50-50 split between what we sell in Canada, what we sell in the U.S. Market share wise, we're much stronger in Canada just because there's not as many competitors, for us to fight off in Canada as there are in the U.S. But when you take our electrical accessory line and our lighting line together, it's almost a 50-50 split. Not quite, but it's getting closer every year. The Canadian market is a fantastic market for Grody.
Well, we're up here in the far northern hemisphere, and it really, really breaks my heart every year when it's dark till about 9 in the morning, and then it's dark again at 3:30 in the afternoon. That brings me to headlights. I love selling your headlights, but I wanted to talk to you about a couple of things. So first, why should someone look at the Grody LED headlight over a competitor?
Well, so it's almost as if you'd seen a press release that just went out last week, but I don't think that's the case. We just announced last week, had politicians in from everywhere, the grand opening of a brand new next generation manufacturing center here in our facility. We took about a third of our warehouse and built a brand new manufacturing facility specifically for headlamps for the OEM side of the business. Now, we'll get some aftermarket benefit out of that as well. But we just launched, you may have seen the new Western Star work truck, the heavy duty work truck. That is a Grody LED headlamp on the front of that. And, this facility that we just opened up allows us the ability to expand that. They're modular walls so that we can make that facility bigger. It's all temperature and environmental control. And so that modularity of that facility is going to allow us to really expand. And it's our goal to really become a dominant force in the forward lighting or LED headlamp business on the OEM side. We've been particularly strong in the aftermarket for many, many years. A lot of about half of our business is aftermarket and half is OEM. And we've really had a great success in the aftermarket with partners, people like the company you work for in Canada and and others here in the United States. There's about almost 13,000 locations across North America that you can buy a Grodys part. So we've had pretty good success on the aftermarket side of the business. But we started out. If you go back just a little bit, we talked about the technology for headlamps. We were really, really famous, or particularly in that work truck and side, the Peterbilt, Kenworth type vehicles or the Western Star vehicles, with our Perlux line back probably when you were selling parts, right, with headlamps. The Perlux line, the halogen, the heavy duty stainless steel housings. And over time, as OEM trucks have become more proprietary in the design of their headlights, that line has kind of moved off to the wayside. Where we were really creating strength in the aftermarket now is the sealed beam technology. So the 7-inch round sealed beam that might fit anything from a Jeep Cherokee all the way up to maybe like a Cascadia or something like that, that uses that 7-inch sealed beam. And then also the 5x7, which is really popular in the work truck industry, and then our LED 4x6. So those lights are out there right now on the road. We have a dominant position in the waste industry, the hauler industry, retrofitting our LED sealed beams into those to replace halogen lights. We do a lot of testing. So all the way around to get to your question, we do a lot of testing. We have great beam patterns, and we're not looking to just throw a bunch of light out into the road. We are looking at very clean cutoffs. So the law states very clearly where light can be and where it can't be. So we spend a lot of time making sure that the light has a very clean cutoff, and that helps with the horizon. So you get a good light output. You have good styling. We make sure the fit, form, and function is right. So when you go to put it in, you don't have to do a lot of manipulation to make sure the light fits. All those things go into the product development side to make sure that the product that the consumer, the driver, when they get that product, they're getting their money's worth. They're getting the value for what they're purchasing. I mean, those are a few of the reasons, to choose a Grodys LED headlamp at least.
So some of our customers in the South won't resonate with this problem, but anybody that is up north, either in northern U.S. or, of course, in Canada, they'll know that when we switched to LED headlights, there was a big problem. The headlights themselves were not emitting a lot of heat now that they were LED, and snow would pack on to the point where there was like no light at all. How has Grodys solved that problem with the heated lens?
Yeah, so that problem is really twofold. So you're right there. With the halogen bulb, or the HID bulb, either one, the heat was emitted, and it was shining out enough that the housing and the lens would get warm enough. You wouldn't want to touch it. It wouldn't burn you necessarily, the lens, but it certainly was creating enough heat to melt snow and ice. With that switch over to LED technology, you're purposely trying to pull the heat out of the LED. They call it the junction temperature, where the LED and the circuit board meet. And to ensure the promise of the features and benefits, the life of the LED, you have to pull the heat out of the LED. So you're purposely pulling the heat backwards into the housing away from the lens. So therefore, the lens never really gets that warm. So having a heated product is important. So we've got a couple of options, a couple of products. Part of this new facility that I just mentioned, we are the first production heated lens for the OEM original equipment in the United States or in North America. So that capability is built in with the wireframe on the lens, and that's being done on that side. On the aftermarket, we have just released a new LED snowplow light, right? So that's one market. That uses a glass lens with metal tabs, and it uses a software that senses the temperature and essentially sends current back up into the glass lens to heat up that metal trim ring spring, and then that creates enough heat through the glass lens then to melt snow and ice. In the testing, it will melt snow and ice in about 15 minutes. Once it senses that ambient temperature, it automatically kicks on. The driver doesn't have to do anything. There's no switches or to flip or anything like that. The software will automatically do that. We also have a series of 4x6, 5x7, and 7-inch sealed beams, so that we were talking about before, that utilize that same exact heated technology. Those will be available in the Canadian market probably before the year's end. For the U.S. market, they may be a little further behind. It'll be January, February before we hit those. But again, the Canadian market is really where the biggest demand for that heated light is. So we planned that release for Canada sooner than we did in the U.S.
You're listening to the Heavy Duty Parts Report. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin, and today we've been talking with Chris. He's a global market manager for the aftermarket at Grodys. And we've been talking all about Grodys' great heritage and history and some of the great products that they have brought out. But I'd like to shift focus a little bit. I remember when LED lights kind of became prolific, and one of the big conversations we had with fleets was an LED tail light. When you switch over to LED from the old incandescent style, the reaction time of drivers, the amount of time it took for them to see that red light up when the truck applied its brakes on the back of the trailer was faster, and it actually proved that it would reduce rear end collisions. But it sounds to me like from our discussions that in the years between when that technology was first developed and today, there's more work that needs to be done. Could you kind of go into a little bit of what needs to be done to further reduce rear end collisions with tractor trailers?
Sure. I think one of the things that you're noting there, so it's the instant on nature of the LED, and it's the extra stopping distance in that amount of time. But one of the things that we did not have to deal with in the late 80s, early 90s, or the mid 90s when we really came out with LED technology that we deal with now is the cell phone. So a lot of rear end technologies or rear end accidents are still caused by distracted drivers that are looking at phones or looking at devices in the vehicle and not seeing the vehicle stopped ahead of them. So the LEDs work great when the driver behind is actually paying attention to what's going on ahead of them. But if they're looking at a phone, it doesn't matter how long you're stopped or how much time you gave them, they're not looking. So one of the things that has happened, at least in the States, and we're still waiting for clarification of how this will, the situation will take place across the border into Canada. But in the United States, a particular fleet, Grodys, instituted a study on their own without really any kind of permission to see if they could add an extra light on the back of their tankers, if that would reduce the number of rear end collisions. So they did this test for a number of years or a number of months, and they realized their numbers came back that they reduced accidents by 33.7%, rear end collisions by 33.7%. So they got a waiver from NHTSA to add this light based on their study, and so since then, a number of companies, fleets, and others have been working to try to get this waiver as well. Right now, about a month ago or so, NHTSA released a waiver for any other tanker trailer to be able to add a strobing light to the back of their trailer, so that when you hit the brakes, it will strobe, and that will help with rear end accidents. But we're still waiting for a waiver for dry vans and reefers and non-tankers. We hope that the appeal that we are leading, we hope that will be resolved by the end of November for all trailers. But just to kind of give you an idea of the data that we're talking about, in 2018, NHTSA released data that said there were 531,000 accidents that involved heavy-duty trucks. So 531,000 heavy-duty truck incidents. They said about 22% of those are rear end collisions. So that's 116,820 accidents that were rear end collisions in 2018, or in the 2018 data. Now, ACT data says that there are about 3.3 million trailers on the road. And so if you extrapolate that data, that 3.5% of those trailers that were in an accident, it's a big number, right? NHTSA also says the average cost of an accident. Now, this is all accidents. This is passenger cars and all sorts. And so the number I'm going to give you is going to be artificially low, because anybody who's involved in the heavy-duty trucking industry knows that collisions that involve trucks and trailers also typically involve lawyers, whether or not it's the truck owner or an operator's fault or not. But the average dollar amount that NHTSA says that an accident cost is $10,083. So if we take that 116,000 accidents that were rear end collisions times the 10,000, we're talking about someplace close to $325 million in cost, right? And so we use that data that to calculate that data. We're really talking about a small segment of the market, right? We're not even using the entire market when we do that. we're saying 3.5% of the trailers that are in operation were involved in an accident. At 3.5% of those trailers that were involved in an accident, that was $325 million in accident. If you can reduce the number of accidents by 33%, like the Groendyke study says, that means we're going to end up saving, without boring your viewers with a bunch of math, we're going to be saving 109 million, almost 110 million dollars in accident cost to the industry if we can reduce the number of rear end accidents. So these waivers about putting these strobing stoplights on the back of trailers, whether it be tankers or whether they be dry vans or reefers, we know that the data so far says that we're going to reduce those accidents, and it could be $110 million a year savings at that $10,000 per accident level. And again, we all know that it's more than $10,000 when a car hits the back of a trailer in a rear end accident. So that number is only going to go higher. But the data that we use is the data that's published versus what we know in our hearts, right? So yeah, there's $110 million we think savings available just by this waiver being released, and that's doesn't even talk about out of operation and all the other things that go along with that.
Right. So that's a very conservative number. Is this a secondary light, or is this built into the actual taillights?
So different lighting manufacturers are taking different approaches to this. We have a couple of competitors that have released a product that they already had, a strobing light that you would tie in. We've actually built a purpose-built light, because what we did is we worked with one of the top 10, well, without giving their name, one of the top 10 fleets in the United States, and tested a number of different products, different platforms, the best way to do that. And their test results was they would prefer to have something that strobed amber and then went to solid red on, so it looked like a brake light. So the product that we are introducing to go along with this waiver release allows the driver to hit the brakes. It strobes amber for 5 seconds and then goes solid on red, so it looks like a brake light. So it gets your attention. There was concerns that if you're stopped at a stoplight, for instance, and you hit the brake and the thing was just strobing the whole time, you could have an epileptic or something in the car behind you, you'd have a problem, or people just start ignoring it and everything is flashing all the time. They just ignore it. So the idea was that if you could strobe it and then go to solid on, it would get more attention. So we're introducing that product. It works with a conversion pigtail and a jumper system. So it's really flexible. We've identified at least 5 different installation methods. Depending on the fleet, they might want 2 lamps at the top. They might want 1 lamp in the middle. They might want 2 on the bottom, 2 on the top, 5 different variations. And we have a harnessing system that will allow you to basically take the harness out of the back of the stop tail turn lamp that's already there, plug this conversion pigtail in between, and that will run the power to the lamp. And so when you hit the brakes, the signal goes through and it automatically signals the strobe light, and that will turn it on. And we believe it's going to be the most cost-effective, the most robust, and the easiest to install. And for the fleets, that's the key, because it's going to be very easy to retrofit. It's surface mount. You don't have to cut any holes. It plugs into the preeminent harness system out on the market, which is the Grodys Ultra Blue Seal. We have the largest market share, so it's very easy for the fleets to be able to install that without having to cut harnesses, without having to splice or anything else. It's just all plug and play. So we think we have a good solution for the market.
So being able to retrofit is very important. What has to happen for this to become industry standard and to start to see trailers rolling off the production line with this technology already built in? Is there steps that need to still be taken? Because this is going to save lives.
Yeah. So that data says that in those rear end collisions, there were 151,000 injuries and almost 5,000 people killed, right, in those accidents we were talking about before. So the initial waivers are for fleets to be able to retrofit this system onto their existing equipment. Right now, because it's not a FMVSS or CMVSS regulated light, OEMs might choose to go ahead and install it if their large customer is demanding it. But some OEMs are saying, hold on until there's a legal requirement. We can't do it. We are working through that with some OEMs. Hey, go ahead and install it. Just don't hook it up, and then the fleet can hook it up, and then so we're trying to come up with solutions for the OEMs. But I think until NHTSA makes a permanent decision versus the waiver. I don't think the OEMs will be moving there just yet, but there's hope, and we think it'll happen sooner rather than later.
You've been listening to the Heavy Duty Parts Report. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin. We've been speaking with Chris Kamek, Global Market Manager Aftermarket for Grody. If you want to learn more, go to grody.com. Links are in the show notes. Chris, thank you for being on the Heavy Duty Parts Report.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you so much for tuning in to this week's episode of the Heavy Duty Parts Report. I'm your host, Jamie Irvin, and I just like to remind everyone to focus on cost per mile and let's keep those trucks and trailers rolling. You can watch our next video. Make sure to click the like button, write a comment, and don't forget to subscribe.